Daniel had been driving for 3 years, nights, weekends, and every hour in between. He knew the city better than most maps could tell. He'd seen the wild drunks, the heartbroken couples, the odd loners who rode in silence staring at their phones. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for that night in late November. It was cold, the kind of Chicago cold that pressed into your bones. Daniel had been debating whether to take one last trip before heading home when the app chimed. Pick up, South Ashland Avenue. Just one rider. 20 minutes away, destination close to the river. Easy money. He pulled up to the curb where the map pointed. At first glance, the street was deserted. Empty houses, a busted street lamp flickering like a dying candle. Then he saw her. A woman stood perfectly still under the lamp's broken glow. Her coat was long, too thin for the biting cold. Her hair hung in loose strands that covered most of her face. She didn't wave, didn't move, just stood there as though waiting for him specifically. Daniel hesitated. There was something unnatural about the way she held herself, like a mannequin propped up on a display. But the app confirmed it. Pickup successful. He unlocked the doors. She slid into the back seat without a word. The door closed softly and instantly the temperature in the car dipped. Daniel fiddled with the heater. Evening, he offered. Cold night, huh? No response. He checked the mirror. Her head was angled toward the window, strands of hair still covering her features. Only the pale outline of her skin was visible, glowing faintly under the passing streetlights. Fine, Daniel thought. Silent type. He'd driven plenty of those. He tapped the GPS and pulled onto the road. The route stretched 20 minutes, mostly down dark industrial roads. Daniel tried not to stare at the mirror, but something about her posture was unnerving, too rigid, too still. He could swear she hadn't shifted once since she sat down. 10 minutes into the ride, it happened. He glanced up at the mirror again. There were 2 people in the back seat. His breath caught. The woman was still there, face toward the window. But next to her in the far corner slouched a man. His features blurred in the shadow, but Daniel saw the outline of broad shoulders. A bent neck, a figure breathing slow and heavy. Daniel's grip on the wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. He hadn't seen anyone else get in, and his app still showed 1 passenger only. His heart pounded. Exhaustion, maybe? He'd been driving too long. He blinked hard, rubbed his eyes, dared to glance back again. The man was still there, closer now. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to sound casual. You need a soa. Hey, do you want the AC adjusted? The woman didn't move. The man shifted slightly, his head twitching upward as though acknowledging the question, but his face remained hidden. Daniel's phone buzzed. He nearly jumped out of his skin. It was a push notification from the rideshare company itself. Remember, never allow unregistered passengers into your vehicle. A chill crawled down Daniel's spine. He hadn't. The car seemed smaller now, the air heavier. He focused on the road, refusing to check the mirror again, but his peripheral vision betrayed him. The figure leaned forward inch by inch, like a predator closing in. At one point, Daniel swore he heard it, the faint rasp of breath behind his ear, though no one sat in the front. He swallowed, hands slick on the steering wheel. The GPS chimed. In 2 miles, turn left. Relief surged through him. Just a few more minutes, just drop her off and leave. But when he risked another glance in the mirror, his heart stopped. The man was upright now, staring directly at him. And the face, Daniel gasped. It wasn't a stranger at all. It was his own face, pale and hollow, eyes sunken as if weeks of death had already claimed him. The car swerved. He fought the wheel, nearly hitting the guardrail. His breathing came ragged, mind spinning. He snapped his head around to confront the back seat. Empty. Both passengers gone. Only the faint imprint of weight lingered on the leather seats. The smell of damp earth filled the car. Daniel sat frozen, chest heaving. Then his phone chimed again. Another notification. Thank you for completing your trip. He looked down. The fare receipt showed a completed ride. No. But instead of a name in the passenger field, there were just 2 words. He should have gone home right then. Should have logged off, parked the car, and never opened the app again. But shock makes people irrational. Daniel told himself it had to be stress, or exhaustion, or some glitch in the app combined with an overactive imagination. He needed to test it, to prove to himself that what he saw wasn't real. So he stayed online. Just 10 minutes later, another request came through. Different name, different address. Daniel accepted. When the rider climbed in, this time a young man with headphones, Daniel checked the mirror obsessively. Nothing unusual. No extra shapes, no shadows. The man chatted casually, paid attention to his music. It felt normal again. But then the young man leaned forward. "Hey," he said quietly. "Is it okay if your friend doesn't touch me?" Daniel frowned. "What friend?" The rider gestured vaguely to the back seat, directly beside him. "The other guy. He's been staring at me since I got in." Daniel's blood ran cold. He wanted to deny it, to insist there was no one else, but the words stuck in his throat. Slowly, against every screaming instinct, he glanced at the mirror. There it was again, that figure, sitting upright, watching. The passenger noticed his silence and gave a nervous laugh. "Weird, man. I thought maybe it was your buddy hitching a ride or something. He looks pale." Daniel slammed his foot on the brakes, pulling the car to the side of the empty road. "Get out," he barked. The passenger's eyes widened. "What? Why?" "Just get out, now." Confused and frightened, the man obeyed, stumbling out into the cold night. The car door slammed shut. Daniel hit the lock button, heart pounding. He turned, expecting to see the shadow still there. But the back seat was empty again. He drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, his thoughts unraveling. No music, no radio, just the sound of his own shallow breathing and the occasional creak of the car frame. But no matter how far he went, the sense of being watched never left him. At 3 a.m., he finally gave up. He switched the app off and headed home. His apartment was quiet, dark. He collapsed onto his couch, body trembling. Sleep should have claimed him, but it didn't. Instead, he kept hearing faint noises in the apartment, floorboards creaking, a whisper of movement in the hallway. At one point he opened his eyes and saw the silhouette of a man standing in the doorway. Not moving, just watching. But when he flicked on the light, nothing. The following day, Daniel deleted the rideshare app from his phone. He told himself he'd quit driving for good. He'd find another job, anything else. But when he checked his phone later that afternoon, the app had reinstalled itself. No matter how many times he deleted it, it came back. And each time it returned, the passenger list showed one name waiting for pickup. Mia had been a rideshare driver for almost 2 years. Nights, weekends, early mornings, she knew the city streets like the back of her hand. She had heard stories from other drivers, strange passengers, unexplained disappearances, sightings of people who vanished mid-ride. But she never believed them. Until the night she picked up Daniel. The app pull location, Old Mill Road, a stretch of dimly lit streets near the industrial district. The profile picture was dark blurred, only his first name appeared, Daniel. No reviews, no rating. She hesitated for a moment, feeling a familiar chill run down her spine, but curiosity and the promise of extra fare pushed her forward. The streets were nearly empty, fog curling along the asphalt, muffling the hum of the city. As Mia approached the pin, she noticed him standing near the curb. A tall man in a long coat, his hands in his pockets, posture stiff, staring at nothing in particular. She slowed and honked softly. He walked toward her car without looking at it, slid into the back seat, and remained completely silent. "Evening," she said, trying to keep her voice light. "Where to?" Daniel only nodded toward the GPS. No words, no expression. At first the ride seemed normal enough. The silence pressed in on her, but she'd had quiet passengers before. Yet something felt off. She caught herself stealing glances in the rearview mirror. His face was pale, unnervingly so, almost glowing in the dim interior light, and his eyes, they weren't focusing anywhere in particular. It was as if he were staring through her. Minutes passed, the road twisted and dipped, flanked by abandoned warehouses and skeletal trees. Then, Mia noticed movement. Daniel's head turned slightly, and from the shadows beside him, she saw a second figure slowly materialize. A woman, or at least something with a female outline. Her skin was grayish, her hair hanging in wet strands over her face. She didn't blink, didn't move, only stared at Mia. Mia's hands gripped the wheel, knuckles white. Who is that?" she whispered, barely audible. Daniel remained motionless. His lips never moved. The figure beside him did not vanish, even as she squinted to confirm what she was seeing. The car's heater sputtered. A chill ran through the cabin, colder than the November night outside. The radio static intensified until she had to switch it off. Suddenly, Daniel's hand brushed the back of the seat, just slightly. The woman turned her head toward Mia. Her eyes, black hollow pits, reflected nothing as though they absorbed the dim light. She leaned forward a fraction, closer, and Mia felt a pull, like a cold wind rushing past her skin, whispering in a voice she could not hear. Mia slammed her eyes shut for a moment. When she opened them, the woman was gone. Daniel's face had changed subtly. His pale skin now seemed almost translucent, his features sharper, more angular, his eyes darker. "Stop the car," he finally said, voice low and commanding, almost unnatural. Mia's pulse raced. "I can't, the GPS." He tilted his head almost imperceptibly. "Stop." Shivering, she obeyed. The car rolled to a halt in the middle of the fog-laden street. No houses, no lights, only shadows stretching across the cracked asphalt. Mia dared to glance at the rearview mirror. Empty. The second figure, the woman, had vanished. Daniel remained silent, his form as solid as ever, yet somehow wrong. A soft tap sounded from the back seat. Mia spun around. Nothing. Then, almost simultaneously, the passenger app pinged. A notification: trip completed. Mia's breath caught. She hadn't reached the destination yet, and her passenger, the human one, Daniel, was still in the car. Her fingers trembled as she unlocked the app, heart hammering. The passenger info was gone. Just 2 words in its place: silent passenger. Unable to process what had happened, Mia drove aimlessly. The fog thickened, road signs blurred, and her sense of direction failed her. Every shadow along the roadside seemed to flicker unnaturally, leaning closer with each passing second. Then she saw him again, standing on the side of the road, a tall figure, same coat, same unreadable face. He raised a hand slowly. Mia's hands gripped the wheel so hard it hurt. She slammed on the accelerator, tires squealing against the asphalt, but when she glanced again, he was gone. The next night she logged into the app hesitantly. Her profile appeared normal. She accepted a new ride. Pick up Old Mill Road. She froze. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, same blurred photo. She considered canceling, but something compelled her to continue. She needed answers. The ride began normally. Daniel entered the car. This time, she noticed subtle changes. His posture slightly bent, his hands shaking, as though he carried weight beyond understanding. Halfway through, Mia noticed shadows crawling along the edges of the car. The woman from the previous night appeared in flashes beside him, gone before she could focus. The temperature dropped sharply, fog creeping in through closed windows, seeping into her lungs. Where are we going, Mela?" Mia stammered. Daniel's reply was a whisper, more felt than heard, somewhere between the living and the forgotten. Her pulse quickened. Panic surged. The fog outside seemed alive, curling and twisting like it had its own intent. Each second stretched unnaturally, the road ahead bending in impossible angles. Suddenly the car jolted. The headlights illuminated a figure, another passenger, sitting in the back seat beside Daniel, head tilted unnaturally, eyes blank, staring directly at Mia. A scream formed in her throat, but no sound emerged. The figure leaned forward, closer, and she felt a pull in her chest, an impossible weight pressing her down into the seat. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, the figure was gone. Daniel remained, but he no longer seemed entirely human. His form flickered, partially transparent, and his eyes were voids of darkness. The GPS glitched again, pointing to a place that didn't exist on any map she knew. Signs twisted into indecipherable symbols. The fog thickened until Mia could no longer see the road or the horizon. Time lost meaning. Minutes stretched into hours. She could feel the car moving, yet standing still at the same moment. A voice whispered from the shadows of the back seat, unintelligible but filled with grief and malice. Finally, Daniel spoke again. "End of the road." She braced herself. The car stopped. The fog parted briefly to reveal a structure, an abandoned building, windows dark, doors hanging ajar. The woman appeared, floating near the entrance, her face wet with tears, eyes hollow, mouth whispering words Mia couldn't comprehend. Daniel slid out of the car silently, turning to face Mia. She opened her mouth to scream, but before she could, the world seemed to tilt. The car was empty. The car was empty. The fog swallowed everything. Her phone buzzed. The app had reinstalled itself automatically, showing one pending ride. Silent passenger. Mia never drove again after that night. She left the city, changed her number, and avoided any service connected to ride-sharing. But she could never shake the feeling of being watched. The echo of hollow eyes staring at her from empty seats, whispering from shadows just beyond perception. And every night when the fog rolled in, She could still hear that same whisper through the cracks of the city. You shouldn't drive alone at night. Mia had barely escaped the events of the previous nights. Though she had fled the city, abandoned her rideshare career, and changed her number, the memory of Daniel and the faceless passengers lingered in every shadow, in every quiet corner of her apartment. It had been weeks, but that night, the night the fog rolled thick over Old Mill Road, haunted her more vividly than anything else. She tried to sleep, tried to convince herself it was all her imagination. But at 2:47 a.m., her phone vibrated with a notification that made her blood run cold. It was an email, no subject, no sender, only one line. Tonight the silent passenger returns. Her apartment felt suddenly smaller. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of the streetlights outside seemed amplified. She tried to tell herself it was a joke, but the fear was real, biting at her lungs. Against her instincts, she reached for her laptop. The email repeated across multiple accounts. Not just email, her old rideshare app had somehow reinstalled itself, flashing one pending ride. Daniel, Old Mill Road. Her hands shook. She knew she could never go back, and yet, an irrational part of her felt compelled to accept. By midnight, curiosity, or perhaps some darker instinct, had driven her to pack her old car. She had avoided this vehicle for weeks, leaving it unused in her garage. But tonight she told herself she needed answers. The streets were unnervingly quiet. Street lamps flickered weakly through a creeping mist. Her headlights cut through the fog, illuminating nothing. And then, standing at the pickup point was Daniel. He appeared exactly the same. Long coat, pale skin, unreadable expression. But this time, there was a third figure standing beside him. It was faint, like smoke, difficult to discern, yet undeniably human. The shape shifted, leaning slightly toward her, as though beckoning. Mia swallowed. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. She unlocked the car, and Daniel slid into the back seat first. The second figure followed silently, vanishing when she blinked. For the first few minutes, she tried to keep her mind rational. The GPS route was abnormal, looping into streets she didn't recognize, areas she had never driven before. The fog outside was thick, pressing against the windshield, warping the light. Daniel said nothing, but she could feel his gaze, heavy and intrusive. Every glance in the rearview mirror revealed shadows that moved independently of him. The air grew colder. She could see her own breath fogging up the glass, though the heater was on full blast. Then it happened. A hand touched her shoulder. She screamed, jerking forward, eyes snapping to the back. Nothing was there. The seat was empty except for Daniel, who remained perfectly still. The car trembled subtly at first, then violently. The GPS screen glitched, showing roads that did not exist. The fog thickened to the point that the outside world vanished entirely. She was suspended in a haze of gray, the headlights reflecting off nothing. Mia's panic escalated. She tried to exit the vehicle, unlock the doors, anything, but they wouldn't respond. Daniel's hand rested on the back of the seat beside him, though he hadn't moved. And then she saw it. Another figure seated behind him now. Pale, faceless, barely there, this figure leaned forward, head tilting unnaturally, as if inspecting her. A low, almost imperceptible whisper filled the cabin. She could not comprehend the words, but the intent was clear: dread, despair, warning. Mia fought to breathe, her heart hammering. Her eyes darted between the mirror, the seat, the shadows. She saw glimpses of the same woman from Story 2, her hair wet, her gown torn, expressionless. She could feel the weight of her stare pressing against her skull. Every instinct screamed for her to escape. But the car moved as if controlled by unseen hands. The engine hummed steadily, wheels rolling through streets that bent and twisted impossibly. The GPS displayed a destination labeled, nowhere minutes or hours passed. Mia lost all sense of time. The backseat figures multiplied. Shadows coalesced into shapes, some human, some barely so. Each whispered in unison, a chorus of soft, hollow tones that wrapped around her mind, squeezing, suffocating. Daniel remained silent, his face unchanged, but she could sense something within him shifting, an unnatural weight, a presence older and darker than any living human. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. Trembling, she checked it. Another message. Do you see them yet? No sender, no number, just those words, simple and terrifying. The car slowed, finally pulling to a stop in a clearing surrounded by gnarled trees. Moonlight barely penetrated the fog, casting twisted shadows across the cracked pavement. Daniel gestured toward the back seat. Mia braced herself. The figures rose, stretching impossibly tall, their movements jerky, unnatural, yet deliberate. They hovered above the seats, a silent audience of death and despair. Mia's stomach churned. She tried to step out, but the doors wouldn't budge. Her phone buzzed again. Another line appeared. "Welcome to the ride you can never leave." A sudden, overwhelming cold enveloped the cabin. The figures leaned closer, their faces morphing, some human, some grotesque, others unrecognizable. Their eyes, black voids, pierced through her, stripping away every last shred of rational thought. The car trembled, then stilled. Silence fell like a shroud. Mia dared to look at Daniel. His eyes reflected the void behind them. Slowly he smiled. Not a friendly smile, but a knowing, endless, impossible curve that promised she would never forget. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the fog dissipated. The car's interior light flickered. The figures were gone. Daniel slumped in the back seat, his face blank, empty, nothing left of the unnatural aura. Mia's hands shook as she pulled the car forward, steering blindly. The streets returned to normal, the familiar cityscape, street lamps, distant traffic. She glanced at the GPS. The route was ordinary again. No trace of the impossible roads. Her phone buzzed one last time. She checked it, trembling. The message was simple: "Until next time." Mia's breath caught. She knew, deep down, that this was not over. No matter where she drove, no matter how far she ran, the silent passenger would always return. So, they... Watching, waiting, patient. Mia never drove again. She moved across the country, changed her identity, avoided cities, avoided roads. But in the dead of night, when the fog rolls in and silence falls too heavily on the streets, she swears she can hear the faintest whisper, and a single line repeats in her mind over and over: "You shouldn't drive alone at night." And somewhere, unseen, the silent passenger rides again.